Welcome to another amazing episode of our movie. Trust me, you're gonna love this one. At the end of the movie, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to get more of our latest movies. Just relax and enjoy. The movie begins with Nedu, a young man who loves playing football, returning home from a game when a woman he owes money starts chasing him to pay her. While she was shouting in front of his compound, his sister Ada came out, trying to find out what was going on and to settle the situation. The woman angrily told her that Nedu owed her 500 naira and had refused to pay. Ada was surprised and warned the woman not to embarrass her brother over such a small amount. She paid the woman, who left angrily, warning Nedu not to buy anything on credit from her shop again. Their mother then came out, asking, "My superstar, what happened?" referring to Nedu, but they all left without saying anything further. Nedu is the last child of his mother, and Ada is his only sister. Nedu has loved football since he was young, and his dream is to become a professional footballer. He plays very well, defeating all his peers, which makes his mom and sister proud of him. They call him their superstar, believing that he will be the one to lift them out of poverty. They scolded him for buying things on credit and warned him never to do it again, telling him to ask if he needed anything. The next day, Nedu was returning from his usual match when he saw a beautiful lady he had been trying to ask out. He stopped her, complimenting her beauty and gradually confessing that he liked her. The lady didn't take him seriously at first, but after he insisted, she finally accepted, and they hugged. Just then, his sister Ada spotted them, ran over, and slapped Nedu on the head, chasing the girl away and dragging Nedu home as he complained. When they got to the backyard, Ada warned him sternly to keep his focus away from girls and concentrate on his career, as the family was counting on him. She then brought out a small bag containing a gift for Nedu, which made him happy. He promised her that he would stay focused and make them proud. The next morning, Nedu and Ada returned home from a match competition. And Ada excitedly told their mom how well Nedu played, mentioning how the sponsors couldn't take their eyes off him. Their mother was thrilled and prayed that Nedu would be chosen to play abroad as a professional. They all said, "Amen," and Nedu left. Later that night, as they were sitting in the living room, Nedu received a call from the sponsors, informing him that he had been selected to join their team as a professional footballer. Nedu couldn't believe his ears and shouted with joy. His mom and sister asked what happened, and when he explained, they were all ecstatic, dancing and celebrating while calling him a superstar. Wow, that's great news, guys. God is truly great. The next morning, Nedu was preparing to leave, packing his things. His mother was filled with joy, blessed him, and warned him to be careful out there. It was a joyous moment for the family as Nedu left, accompanied by his sister. The next scene begins with a young and handsome guy named Ben, pleading with his fiancée, Tonia, not to go to work because he wanted to spend the whole day with her. However, Tonia insisted that she needed to go make her own money and not rely on Ben. Ben finally agreed and drove her to work. After dropping her off, he headed home. On his way home, Ben accidentally hit Nedu, who was crossing the road. Nedu fell down, seemingly lifeless, as Ada ran to him, crying and shouting at Ben. They quickly put Nedu in the car and rushed him to the hospital. After waiting outside the hospital for a while, the nurse came out and informed them that Nedu was alive but had broken his joint. The injury was severe, and the nurse warned that Nedu might not be able to walk again. Ada was devastated, crying helplessly and blaming Ben for everything. She accused him of extinguishing the light at the end of their tunnel, referring to Nedu, and said that Nedu was the breadwinner of their family. She continued crying while others tried to calm her down, but she lashed out at Ben when he tried to console her. The nurse reassured Ada that they were doing their best and that everything would be fine before leaving. Ada and Ben went into Nedu's ward, where Ada continued crying. Nedu suddenly woke up, complaining of a headache and confused about why he was in the hospital. Ada explained to him that he had been in an accident. Nedu tried to move in bed, but realized he couldn't feel his legs. This made Ada even more scared, and she shouted at Ben to call the doctor. Nedu, worried, asked about his sponsors and if they had called. Ada told him they had, and just then, another call came in from them. Nedu answered the call, explaining that he had been in an accident. They consoled him. It's heartbreaking. Nedu was about to hit the jackpot, and now all this has happened. What will he do now? How will his mother feel? Where will he go from here? Will he ever have the opportunity again? Let's find out. After some time, they all got into Ben's car as he drove them. Suddenly, he asked where he should drop them off, which made Ada angry. She insisted that he take them to his house and that he would be responsible for Nedu until he recovers. Ben didn't like this and offered to compensate them instead, but Ada, still furious, felt like hitting him. She insisted they go to his house, saying that since he had damaged the keg of their breadwinner, he would now be their new breadwinner. At that point, Ben couldn't argue anymore and quietly drove them to his house. When they arrived, Ada was still very upset with Ben. Seeing how beautiful his house was, she concluded that Ben must have had ulterior motives for hitting her brother. Ben, exhausted by all her shouting, apologized again, explaining that it wasn't intentional. Ada calmed down a bit, and Ben offered to show them their room. However, this made Ada angry again, and she sarcastically asked if Ben had any other hidden plans for them as she followed him. After showing them their room, Ben went to his own room and found his girlfriend, Tonia, asleep. Thinking she was awake, he called her name and started explaining everything that had happened that day, saying it was the worst day of his life. Unfortunately, Tonia wasn't listening. She was snoring. Ben noticed this, stopped talking, kissed her cheek, and left the room. Later that night, Ada and Nedu were asleep when Nedu, needing to use the bathroom, tried to get up but fell from the bed. He shouted, waking Ada, who asked why he hadn't woken her to help him. Nedu explained that he knew she was tired and didn't want to trouble her. Ada insisted that he should always ask for her help, reminding him that she was there for that reason. She moved his wheelchair closer and helped him up. Afterward, she went to Ben's room, banging on the door and waking him up. Ben, irritated, asked why she was banging on his door and what she wanted. Ada said, "Your son needs your help," referring to Nedu as his son. Ben replied that he hadn't fathered any children, but Ada retorted that since the day he broke Nedu's leg, he had. She explained that Nedu had fallen while trying to use the bathroom and needed Ben's help because he was a man. She then grabbed Ben's hand and led him to Nedu's room, and Ben followed. The next morning, Ada and Nedu were sitting in the living room discussing their situation when Tonia walked in, surprised to see strangers in the house. She asked who they were, but Ada didn't respond. Tonia kept shouting, which angered Ada, who then explained in frustration what her boyfriend had done, leaving Tonia confused. Tonia wasn't interested in listening and simply wanted them out of the house. Ben came downstairs and calmed her down, telling her he would explain everything as he led her upstairs, even as she continued shouting and insulting Ada. Once upstairs, Ben explained everything to Tonia, but she was still upset that the strangers were in their house. She insisted they should leave, saying it wasn't her business. Ben tried to reason with her, but she wouldn't budge. Later that night, Tonia got dressed to go out, saying she had a big meeting with her sponsors and colleagues. Ben pleaded with her to stay, pointing out that it was late, but Tonia insisted she had to go. Ben even offered to double the money for her, but she still refused and left. Where could she be going at this time of night? Is it really a meeting? Time will tell. The next morning, Ben entered Nedu and Ada's room and found Nedu struggling with the wheelchair. Ben quickly offered to help and assisted him. Nedu explained that he wanted to take a bath, and Ben offered to help, as Nedu couldn't manage on his own yet. Nedu appreciated the gesture. That same morning, Ada went outside to call their mother, who was worried sick since she hadn't heard from them. It had been bothering her. Ada didn't know how to explain their situation, so she lied, saying they had been busy and apologized. Her mother told her to let her know when Nedu returned home. Just as Ada hung up, Tonia came in from her late-night outing, and Ada greeted her, but Tonia didn't respond. As she moved closer to her, she gave Ada a disgusted look and pushed her with her body as she walked away, making Ada feel bad. Later that day, Ada and Nedu were sitting in their room when Ben entered with a piece of clothing in his hand. He gave it to Nedu, who thanked him. Ben then asked Ada if they could go out, but she burst out, shouting, "Go out as what?" Ben clarified that he meant shopping, saying they should go out to buy clothes for her and Nedu. Ada immediately calmed down and agreed to go, adding that he should have explained it better. Ben left, telling her to meet him in the car. Later that day, Nedu was seated in the living room in his wheelchair when Tonia came down, insulting him and accusing him of being a scammer who faked his injury to extort money from her man. Nedu, hurt by her words, responded, "How could you say such a thing?" and explained that he had just been signed as a footballer when her man hit him. Tonia, angry that he dared to talk back, tried to push him out of his wheelchair. Fortunately, Ada and Ben returned just in time, with Ada rushing to defend her brother and pushing Tonia away. The situation escalated, and Tonia slapped Ada. Ada didn't hesitate to slap her back. Gotta love these village girls. Meanwhile, Tonia had already packed her belongings, announcing that she was done with Ben. Ben tried to stop her, but it was no use. After Tonia left, Ben went to Ada's room to apologize for what had happened, assuring her that none of the things Tonia said were true. Ada accepted his apology, saying it was fine, and Ben left. Later that night, while Ben was sleeping, he heard a knock on his door. Thinking it was Tonia, he rushed to open it but was surprised to see Ada instead. He had been hoping Tonia would return, but things had gone too far. She wasn't answering his calls or returning his messages. Was this the end of their relationship? Maybe. Ada told Ben that Nedu needed his help, and Ben assured her he was coming, telling her to go ahead. Ada left. The next morning, Ada was in the kitchen trying to reach the salt but was too short. Luckily, Ben walked in and helped her. For a moment, they gazed into each other's eyes. Ben complimented her, saying her eyes were beautiful, and Ada thanked him. Ben quickly regained his composure, apologizing for the awkward moment. He then informed Ada that he would be taking Nedu to the hospital for a checkup and left. Later that day, Ben and Nedu were sitting in the living room, betting money on a video game match. Nedu warned Ben that he would beat him, but Ben didn't listen. Sure enough, Nedu won twice, and Ben was amazed. Nedu joked that Ben wasn't great with the controller and that he should see him on the field, saying that even Osimhen had nothing on him. Ben smiled, still surprised by Nedu's talent, and encouraged him not to lose hope, assuring him that he would walk again and shine like the star he is. Nedu was pleased to hear this, and they continued their game while Ada, eavesdropping, smiled. Later at the hospital, after Nedu's checkup, Ben asked the doctor if there was a chance that Nedu would walk again. The doctor reassured him that Nedu was healing well and that he shouldn't worry too much, which helped calm Ben. The next morning, Nedu was eating at the dining table when Ben passed by and caught the aroma of the food. He commented that it smelled good, and Ada immediately invited him to join them. He didn't hesitate to accept. After a while, Ada brought out his food, and Ben really enjoyed it. He complimented her cooking and asked for more, saying he hadn't had such good food in a long time. He smiled, relieved, and content. After a few days, Nedu started seeing a therapist for his leg. With daily sessions, there was noticeable improvement. Ben and Ada also helped with Nedu's exercises, and finally, Nedu could stand on his feet again. He even started practicing with a ball, which made Ada very happy. The next morning, Ben's friend came over for a visit. As he was about to leave, Ben asked him to wait, saying he wanted to show him something. Ben went inside and brought Nedu out, introducing him to his friend. Ben suggested they go outside and play football, but his friend initially refused, saying he needed to rest after his trip. Ben insisted, and they finally agreed to play. Nedu played so well that Ben's friend admired his talent. After they finished, Ben spoke to his friend about signing Nedu to his team as a professional player. His friend agreed, saying he also saw great potential in Nedu. Ben thanked him and added that he would also invest in his friend's firm. The next morning, Ben informed Ada that Nedu had been officially signed to a football club as a professional and would be traveling next week. He explained that his friend, who visited the other day, took Nedu to play, and they were so impressed with his skills that they couldn't wait to sign him. They just needed to finalize a few documents. Ada was overjoyed and gave Ben a big hug, thanking him. It was a huge success for her. When one door closes, another big one opens. They celebrated with a glass of wine. Later that day, Ada and Nedu were sitting in the living room when, surprisingly, Tonia arrived with her bags. She stared at them bitterly before heading upstairs. Ada then informed Nedu about his signing, but Nedu couldn't believe it. He was so excited that he felt like running outside to shout. I'm happy for him too. It's not easy. He was incredibly happy that day, like it was the best day of his life. Meanwhile, upstairs, Tonya was pleading with Ben to forgive her. After a long conversation, he finally did, and they hugged. The next morning, Nedu and Ben's friend were set to leave the country. Ada wished Nedu well, advising him to be careful and always stay prayerful. Ben also gave him advice, and Nedu appreciated it. As they were about to leave, Ada turned to Ben and informed him that since her brother was leaving, she would also be leaving first thing tomorrow morning. Ben asked, "So soon?" Which made Tonya burst out, asking if he didn't want Ada to leave, leaving Ben speechless as they all parted ways. Later that night, Ben set up the living room for a movie night with his girlfriend. Unfortunately, during the movie, she got a call and quickly told the person she'd be there in 30 minutes. She stood up abruptly, not even acknowledging Ben's attempts to stop her, saying her career was more important. She left, leaving Ben heartbroken. The next morning, Ada was ready to leave when she found Ben lying on the floor. She had to wake him several times before he finally came to. Ben asked about his girlfriend, Tonya, and Ada replied that she hadn't seen her. Ben then explained what had happened the previous night, and Ada was surprised. She advised Ben to talk to Tonya, adding that a woman who doesn't prioritize a good man doesn't truly love him. Ada then stood up to carry her bags and leave. Ada returned to her village, and her mom was overjoyed to hear that Nedu was now abroad. She danced with happiness. That same morning, Ben and Tonya had an argument, and Tonya broke up with him, telling him to go be with Ada. She packed her things and left, leaving Ben heartbroken. The next day, Ben couldn't stop thinking about Ada. He reminisced about their time together, smiling like a lovesick boy. I think he has fallen in love already. So, Ben decided to go to Ada's village to find her. When he finally saw her, Ada was surprised. Ben apologized for taking so long to confess his feelings for her. Ada was surprised but agreed, and Ben expressed how much he loved her. Ada admitted she had feelings for him too, but didn't want to come between him and his girlfriend, which was why she left. Ben then told her they could start their relationship now, and Ada accepted. They hugged, and just then, Ada's mom appeared and asked who Ben was. Ada introduced him as her friend, and her mom asked how they met. Ada told her it was a long story that she would explain later. Her mom happily invited Ben inside, and they all went in together. That day marked the beginning of the love story between Ben and Ada, and I believe it will be even stronger than the one Ben had with Tonya. So guys, what did you learn from this story? Make sure to drop it in the comment section. Thanks for watching this amazing story from my world of movies. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel to get more interesting and fascinating stories like this. See you in our next movie.